All right, welcome back to Doctrines 3 as we continue on our study of doctrines of angels, church, and end times. In our study of the church, or ecclesiology, I want to talk about perhaps a hot button issue, perhaps a topic that we may differ on in some places. But I want to talk about the qualifications of elders, qualifications of those who should have spiritual leadership within the church. And I promise that I'll try to keep this video short, and so I'm not going to necessarily give full, well-rounded discussion points on each particular qualification. I do want to give kind of an overview of them, talk a little bit about each one of them individually, but I do want you to really sink your teeth into this, find some other resources on the qualifications of elder, and I may even mention a couple along the way as well. First of all, as we talk about the qualifications of elder, these are outlined in two passages in the New Testament. The first is in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7, and the other is Titus chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. It's in two different places because these are two books or two letters that Paul wrote to young pastors on the field. Timothy was, of course, Paul's protege who was serving in Ephesus and kind of following Paul in that pastoral role there. And then Titus had been sent to Crete, the island there in the Mediterranean Sea. Both of them, Paul had sent to be elders or be pastors of those churches, and in both cases, he sent letters in order to instruct these young men. And as they were then to appoint elders themselves, they were given a list of qualifications that Paul said these are the kinds of men that you should pick in order to be leaders or spiritual leaders in the church. Now, one thing I need to make absolutely certain before we start into each one of these individual qualifications, that it's very important to understand that these are qualitative characteristics and not quantitative characteristics. What do I mean by that? That these are to be the quality of the person's life at the moment that they're selected as an elder, not whether or not a person has ever committed one of these things or done one of these things or in any way, shape, or form when he was 4 years old, he did this. Or when he was 21, right out of college, he did this. So therefore, he's exempt from being an elder. And that each one of these are rather qualitative in their design in order to recognize the quality of the person, the character of the person, not necessarily a quantity of how much they've done this, that, or the other thing. These characteristics are to be sought by all men. All people should look to these characteristics to say, these are the characteristics of a mature person. This is someone who is wishing to be Christ-like. And so all of these characteristics are something that at least as we talk about the men of the church should aspire to, that all men are spiritual leaders of their household and should be looking to these qualities in their life to bring about spiritual maturity. There's a great book to that end by a guy by the name of Gene Getz, who's a pastor in the Dallas area, and he wrote several books, but one of those books was called The Measure of a Man, and it's a really neat study for men to get into, a good book for a men's Bible study, and he goes through each one of the qualifications for elders in 1 Timothy and Titus, and takes each one of them individually and really challenges men with, are you doing these things? Is this something that is a quality in your life? All right, let's talk about these 15 characteristics that elders are to typify elders. The very first qualification in both lists, which many scholars believe is actually an overarching qualification that all of the other qualifications come underneath this one qualification, is that the elder is to be above reproach. The word there one who cannot be censored, or someone who should not be reprimanded for something. There's nothing in their life for which someone can accuse him. I always like to think of this as if someone were to make an accusation toward that person, what would be the general response? Would the general response be, yeah, I kind of saw that coming. Yeah, I'm not really all that surprised. Or if an accusation were to come against that elder, would the collective gasp be, no, it can't be, it can't possibly be, because that person is so above reproach? Ultimately, this does not mean a perfect person, but rather a person that cannot be reproached by some accusation. Okay. The second qualification in both lists is husband of one wife. Now, there's a lot that's packed into this. The term itself, the Greek term, simply says a one man or a one woman man, a man of one wife or one woman. So there's a lot that comes in this, because some have speculated to say that this means that he's just simply not a polygamist. And in that time, as Paul is speaking to Timothy and to Titus, there were, in that time, both in Crete and Ephesus and throughout the Roman Empire, there were polygamists. There were people who practiced polygamy, that they had multiple wives. And so it makes sense that Paul is just simply saying, you can't be a polygamist. You must have only one wife. But then the question then becomes, well, what about those who are serial polygamists, as in they've had multiple wives, but not just simply not all at the same time? Does that count? Or what about this? It's because many very conservative churches, conservative believers, believe this means that a man can never have been divorced or remarried, or cannot be married to a woman who has been divorced. That is a very strict interpretation of this qualification. But I want you to come back to that statement that I made at the very beginning, that these are to be qualitative, not quantitative. A little bit later, we're going to be talking about one that says not a striker, or someone who does not hit people. Well, does that mean that a man who can never have hit anyone in his life? Well, that rules out all of the former military or even current military or police officers or any other men who are in that kind of field, because, well, they've hit people before. So we can't see these as quantitative, as in this person has never done this or has always done this, but rather what is the quality of their life? And ultimately, that's the real question. Is this man a one-woman man at this moment? Is this man married to one woman, committed to that one woman for his life? Does he have that commitment to that one woman? And this is ultimately, because we're talking about quality rather than quantity, we need to understand that as the quality of this person, there could be a man who is married to one woman in a literal sense, but his eyes are shifting to other women or to pornography or his eyes are not for one woman. So even though he has been married, or what about a man who has had an affair and yet remains married? Is he still qualified just because his wife stayed with him? I don't think so. If a man has an affair, and especially as he is the leader of a church, even if his wife decides to stay with him, he's still a polygamist. He's still not a man of one woman. Or you could have someone who has had a divorce in his past, has repented of that sin, has turned from that sin, has become a better man, and perhaps at this point the Lord has led him to a different place in his life. Or perhaps that's a time of, well, I got divorced and remarried before I was even saved, and I don't believe that the whole of the Bible, the whole of the New Testament, would disqualify a person for anything for something that was done before they were saved. So again, there's a lot of controversy that swirls around this qualification. I'm not going to answer it necessarily for you. I can tell you what I believe, but ultimately this is up to your church, up to you individually to make a statement as to what that means. Now, one thing that this certainly does mean is that the elder must be a man of one wife. This ultimately excludes women from seeking the position of elder or spiritual leader of the church. This does not mean that women cannot perform duties or work within the church or do ministry or evangelize or even teach others. This simply means that they cannot serve in the function of shepherd or overseer or elder of the church. And again, that may be a hot button issue. It may be something that gets you hot and bothered under the collar. It'd be a great thing to really get into in the discussion questions for the week. Let's go on. Again, that's and unfortunately, here's a sad truth: is I've been a part of a lot of church boards and a lot of other things in my day. And one thing that I've noticed is that people are so tripped up by this one qualification that the husband of one wife qualification almost becomes the primary qualification, and many others are ignored to the detriment of really the church itself, when ultimately being above reproach should be the ultimate quality of that person. And ultimately, if